The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky terrain of the Marine Training Facility in 29 Palms, California. Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez adjusted her pack straps and checked her watch. She had 30 minutes to reach the designated observation point, a task that should have been routine for someone with her experience. What she didn't know was that her path would intersect with a group of Marines who would soon discover something extraordinary about the quiet woman walking alone through their training area. Maria had been a sniper for 8 years, serving 3 tours overseas before returning to the States for what the military called mandatory rotation. The official records showed her as a logistics specialist, a cover story that protected both her identity and the classified nature of her real work. Only a handful of people knew that Staff Sergeant Rodriguez held the unofficial record for the longest confirmed kill in military history, a shot taken during her second deployment that saved an entire platoon from an ambush. The 4 Marines who spotted her that morning were part of a reconnaissance training exercise. Corporal Jake Thompson, Lance Corporals Mike Chen, David Martinez, and Alex Johnson had been moving through the desert since before dawn, practicing stealth movement and observation techniques. They were young, eager, and convinced they were among the best their unit had to offer. When they saw a lone figure moving across their training zone, their first instinct was to intercept and identify the potential security breach. Thompson raised his hand, signaling the others to stop. Through his binoculars, he could see a woman in desert camouflage moving with purpose across the open ground. She carried herself differently than most personnel he'd observed during training exercises. There was something fluid about her movement, a way of reading the terrain that spoke of extensive field experience. "Unknown personnel, Sector 7, Thompson whispered into his radio. Single individual, appears to be military, moving northeast toward Observation Point Alpha." The response crackled back immediately. "Negative on authorization for that sector. Investigate and report." Chen moved up beside Thompson, his own binoculars trained on the figure. "She's good," he admitted grudgingly. "Look how she's using the terrain. Most people would take the direct route, but she's following the natural cover lines." Martinez nodded in agreement. "Yeah, but she's still in a restricted training area without clearance. We need to check her credentials." Johnson, the youngest of the group, was eager to prove himself. "Maybe she's lost. Happens all the time with new personnel." Thompson made the decision. "We intercept. Standard approach, by the book. Johnson, you circle around to the north in case she runs. Chen and Martinez, with me. We approach from the high ground." The 4 Marines began their approach, confident in their abilities and certain they were dealing with someone who had simply taken a wrong turn during a routine exercise. They moved with the precision their training had instilled, using hand signals and maintaining proper spacing. Thompson felt a sense of pride in how smoothly his team operated. They were good, and they knew it. Maria sensed the approach before she saw them. Years of operating in hostile territory had honed her situational awareness to an almost supernatural level. The slight shift in bird calls, the barely perceptible change in the way the wind carried sounds, the faint reflection of sunlight off equipment that wasn't quite perfectly camouflaged. For individuals, approaching from multiple directions with military precision. She continued walking, her pace unchanged, but her mind quickly assessed the situation. Her orders were clear: maintain cover identity at all costs. As far as these Marines knew, she was Staff Sergeant Rodriguez from Logistics, temporarily assigned to the base for equipment inventory duties. The story would hold up under casual scrutiny, but she hoped it wouldn't come to that. Thompson's team reached their positions and began their approach. They moved well, Maria acknowledged silently, better than many soldiers she'd worked with overseas. But they made small mistakes, the kind only someone with her level of experience would notice. Chen's shadow was visible for a fraction of a second longer than necessary when he moved between rocks. Martinez's breathing pattern changed slightly when he thought he might have been spotted. Johnson's eagerness made him move just a bit too fast, creating small sounds in the gravel that a more patient approach would have avoided. "Ma'am, halt and identify yourself," Thompson called out when they were within 50 meters. His voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed, but there was also a note of respect. He could tell by her posture and movement that this wasn't some lost clerk who had wandered into a training area by mistake. Maria stopped and turned, her expression calm and professional. Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez, Logistics Division. I have authorization to be in this area. She reached slowly for her identification, making no sudden movements that might be interpreted as threatening. Thompson approached, his rifle lowered but ready. Behind him, the other Marines maintained their positions, covering the angles as they'd been taught. Ma'am, we're going to need to see that authorization. This is a restricted training zone. As Maria handed over her paperwork, she studied the 4 young Marines. Thompson was clearly the leader, confident but not arrogant, someone who took his responsibilities seriously. Chen had the build and demeanor of someone who spent extra time in the gym, probably hoping for selection to Special Forces. Martinez looked like he might have grown up in a rough neighborhood, someone who joined the Marines to prove something to himself and the world. Johnson was the youngest, maybe 20 years old, with the eager expression of someone who still believed war was glorious. Thompson examined her credentials carefully. Everything appeared to be in order, but something nagged at him. The way she carried herself, the way her eyes constantly scanned their surroundings even while standing still, the fact that her gear looked broken in rather than fresh from supply. This wasn't some rear echelon soldier on a routine mission. What's your business in this sector, Staff Sergeant? He asked, handing back her identification. Equipment inventory, Maria replied smoothly. Some gear was reported missing from exercises conducted in this area last month. I'm here to verify whether it was properly recovered or if we need to conduct a more extensive search. It was a good cover story because it was partly true. There had been missing equipment, though Maria's real mission had nothing to do with finding it. She was here to test new observation equipment that might eventually be used in sniper operations, equipment that required field testing in realistic conditions. Chen stepped forward, his curiosity getting the better of his training. You're moving like someone with field experience, Staff Sergeant. Where did you serve? Maria's expression didn't change, but internally she weighed her response. These Marines weren't just going through the motions of a security check. They were genuinely interested, possibly suspicious. She needed to give them enough information to satisfy their curiosity without revealing anything that might compromise her actual mission. I did a couple of tours, she said carefully. Afghanistan, mostly convoy security and supply route verification. Nothing too exciting. Martinez nodded. Convoy security's dangerous work. Lost a lot of good people on those roads. Too many, Maria agreed, and, for a moment, the careful mask slipped. The pain in her voice was real, drawn from memories of friends who hadn't made it home. It wasn't from convoy duty, but the loss was genuine nonetheless. Johnson, who had been listening quietly, suddenly spoke up. Staff Sergeant, with respect, you move like infantry, not logistics. I've seen plenty of supply personnel, and they don't read terrain the way you do. Thompson shot Johnson a warning look, but the damage was done. The young Marine had voiced what they were all thinking. Maria Rodriguez might have logistics credentials, but her field craft suggested a very different kind of experience. Maria smiled slightly. You're observant, Lance Corporal. I cross-trained with infantry during my deployments. When you're running supplies to forward operating bases, it helps to think like the people you're supporting. It was another good answer, technically truthful and reasonable enough to explain her movement skills. But Thompson wasn't entirely convinced. He'd worked with enough different types of soldiers to recognize the signs of someone with specialized training. The way she positioned herself to maintain visual contact with all 4 Marines while keeping escape routes open, the way her hands remained ready but not threatening, the complete absence of nervousness despite being outnumbered and questioned by armed Marines. We'll need to escort you to the command post for verification, Thompson decided. Standard procedure for unauthorized personnel in training areas. Maria nodded. I understand, Corporal. Lead the way. As they began walking toward the base, Chen fell into step beside her. So what kind of equipment are you looking for out here? Night vision devices, mostly, Maria replied. A set went missing after the last exercise. Expensive gear, the kind that makes generals unhappy when it doesn't get returned to the armory. We did a night exercise out here 2 weeks ago, Martinez offered. Didn't lose any gear that I know of, but things get chaotic in the dark. That's when mistakes happen, Maria agreed. Easy to set something down and forget where you left it when you're focused on the mission. Thompson listened to the conversation while maintaining tactical awareness of their surroundings. Something about this woman continued to bother him, though he couldn't put his finger on exactly what. She answered questions readily enough, her story held together, and her credentials were legitimate. But there were small details that didn't add up. Her boots, for instance, were broken in but showed signs of use in different types of terrain than what a logistics specialist would typically encounter. The wear pattern suggested someone who spent time moving carefully through brush and over rocks, not someone who walked mostly on roads and base pathways. Her hands had small scars that looked like they'd come from fieldcraft training, the kind of minor injuries that accumulated when someone learned to move through hostile territory without leaving signs of their passage. Johnson, walking slightly behind the group, was studying Maria with the intensity of someone trying to solve a puzzle. He'd grown up hunting with his grandfather in the mountains of Colorado, and something about the way Maria moved reminded him of the old man's stories about military snipers he'd known in Vietnam. The way she seemed to catalog every piece of cover, every potential firing position, every escape route. "Staff Sergeant," Johnson said suddenly, "what's the effective range of an M24 sniper rifle?" The question caught everyone off guard, including Maria. It was an odd thing to ask a logistics specialist, though not impossible that someone might know the answer from general military knowledge. "About 800 meters for a skilled marksman," Maria replied without hesitation, then caught herself. "Though I only know that from reading technical specifications. Never used one myself." Thompson noticed the slight pause before her disclaimer. It was the kind of hesitation someone might have when they realized they'd answered too quickly, with too much certainty. The M24's effective range was indeed around 800 meters, but that was specific technical knowledge that most logistics personnel wouldn't have memorized. "My grandfather was a sniper in Vietnam," Johnson continued, apparently oblivious to the tension his question had created. "He used to tell me stories about the guys who could make impossible shots. Said the best ones weren't necessarily the best marksmen, but the ones who could read conditions and wait for the right moment." Maria's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. "Your grandfather sounds like he was a wise man. Patience is important in any military specialty. He always said the hardest part wasn't the shooting," Johnson went on. "It was everything else. Getting into position without being seen, reading the wind, calculating for distance and elevation, then getting out alive afterward." "Sounds like your grandfather understood the complexity of the job," Maria replied carefully. Chen had been listening to the exchange with growing interest. "Johnson, why are you giving Staff Sergeant Rodriguez a lecture on sniper tactics?" Johnson shrugged. "Just making conversation. Besides, she moves like someone who'd understand what my grandfather meant about fieldcraft." Thompson made a mental note to have a discussion with Johnson about appropriate conversation topics during security procedures, but he was also curious about Maria's responses. She seemed more comfortable discussing military tactics than equipment inventories, and her knowledge was more detailed than he'd expect from someone whose primary job involved managing supplies. As they approached the base perimeter, Maria considered her options. The command post would have personnel who might recognize her from her previous visits, though she'd been careful to maintain her cover identity during those interactions. The bigger risk was that these 4 Marines were clearly intelligent and observant. They'd picked up on inconsistencies in her cover story, and their suspicions would only grow if they had time to think about their observations. "Corporal Thompson," she said, "I appreciate your thoroughness, but I should mention that my commanding officer is expecting a report from me within the hour. If we're going to make this an extended verification process, I'll need to contact him." "Of course, Staff Sergeant. We'll make this as quick as possible." Thompson was being professional, but Maria could hear the underlying skepticism in his voice. These Marines weren't going to just accept her explanation and move on. They'd continue asking questions, probing for inconsistencies, until they either satisfied their curiosity or uncovered information she couldn't afford to have revealed. The training facility's main building came into view, a low concrete structure that housed administrative offices and communications equipment. Maria could see several vehicles parked outside, including a Humvee with communications gear that suggested the presence of someone with significant authority. She hoped whoever was in charge would be someone she could work with, someone who understood the importance of maintaining operational security even during routine interactions. As they reached the building's entrance, Thompson turned to his team. Chen, Martinez, maintain perimeter security. Johnson, with me. Maria noticed that Thompson was following proper procedures for escorting a potentially questionable individual, but he was also being respectful. These were good Marines, she realized, the kind of soldiers the Corps was supposed to produce. Professional, thorough, but not overly aggressive or suspicious without cause. The interior of the building was typical of military administrative facilities: fluorescent lighting, painted concrete walls, and the distinctive smell of coffee, paper, and electronic equipment. A staff sergeant behind the reception desk looked up as they entered. "What can I do for you, Corporal Thompson?" "We need verification of authorization for Staff Sergeant Rodriguez here. She was found in Training Sector 7 conducting equipment inventory." The receptionist, whose name tag read Wilson, looked at Maria with professional interest. "I'll need to see your orders, Staff Sergeant." Maria handed over her paperwork, noting that Wilson examined it with the same careful attention Thompson had shown. The story would hold up, she was confident of that, but she was beginning to worry about the level of scrutiny her presence was attracting. "Everything appears to be in order," Wilson said after a few minutes. "Though I don't show any coordination with base security for operations in Sector 7. The missing equipment report was filed directly with Divisional Supply," Maria explained. "I was told base coordination had been handled, but it's possible there was a communication breakdown." Wilson nodded. "Happens more often than it should. Let me contact the duty officer to verify." As Wilson reached for his phone, Maria realized that her carefully constructed cover story was about to face its most serious test. The duty officer would either confirm her authorization or reveal that no such mission had been coordinated with base operations. She had contingency plans for either scenario, but she preferred to avoid complications that might attract unwanted attention to her actual mission. Thompson and Johnson stood nearby, maintaining the professional demeanor of Marines following proper security procedures. But Maria could see the curiosity in their eyes, particularly Johnson's. The young Marine had clearly picked up on details that suggested she was more than she appeared to be, and his questions about sniper tactics hadn't been coincidental. The phone conversation Wilson was conducting remained professional but seemed to be taking longer than a simple verification should require. Maria began to mentally prepare for the possibility that her cover story might not hold up under detailed scrutiny. She had backup identification and authorization that would resolve the situation, but using it would compromise the security of her actual mission. As she waited for Wilson to complete his call, Maria found herself genuinely impressed by the 4 Marines who had intercepted her. They'd conducted themselves professionally throughout the encounter, showing both tactical competence and appropriate respect for military protocol. Thompson in particular had demonstrated the kind of leadership abilities that suggested he'd go far in the Corps if he continued to develop his skills. Johnson's curiosity about sniper operations was interesting too. The young Marine had good instincts, and his questions suggested someone who thought tactically rather than just following procedures. With the right training and experience, he might develop into the kind of soldier who could handle specialized assignments. Wilson hung up the phone and turned back to Maria with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez," Wilson said carefully, "I spoke with the duty officer, and there seems to be some confusion about your authorization. He's asking you to remain here while he makes additional contacts." Maria felt a familiar tension settle in her shoulders, the same feeling she'd experienced countless times when a mission began to deviate from the planned scenario. The duty officer's request wasn't unusual, but it meant her cover story was being subjected to more scrutiny than she'd anticipated. "How long do you expect this to take?" she asked, keeping her voice level and professional. Shouldn't be more than 30 minutes, Wilson replied. Can I get you some coffee while you wait? Thompson stepped forward. Staff Sergeant, would you prefer to wait in the conference room? It might be more comfortable. Maria recognized the offer for what it was, a polite way of keeping her under observation while preventing her from overhearing potentially sensitive radio communications. That would be fine, Corporal. Thank you. As Thompson led her toward a small conference room, Johnson lingered near Wilson's desk, apparently fascinated by a bulletin board covered with training schedules and unit announcements. Maria noticed that the young Marine was positioning himself where he could observe both her and the communications equipment. The conference room was stark but functional, with a metal table, 6 chairs, and a whiteboard that showed remnants of someone's tactical planning session. Thompson gestured for Maria to take a seat while he remained standing near the door. Johnson entered a moment later, closing the door behind him. Staff Sergeant, Johnson said, his voice carrying a note of excitement, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but you remind me a lot of my grandfather's stories about military snipers. Thompson shot Johnson a warning look. Lance Corporal, that's enough. But Maria was intrigued despite herself. Johnson's grandfather had served in Vietnam, a conflict that had produced some of the most skilled snipers in military history. What kinds of stories did your grandfather tell you? He talked about patience mostly, Johnson replied, ignoring Thompson's disapproving expression. Said the best snipers could stay in position for days without moving, just watching and waiting for the right shot. But he also said they moved differently than other soldiers, like they were always calculating distances and angles. Your grandfather sounds like he had a lot of respect for specialized soldiers, Maria observed. He did. He used to say that snipers saved more lives than people realized, because one well-placed shot could prevent an entire battle. But he also said it took a special kind of person to do that job, someone who could handle the isolation and responsibility. Thompson was about to intervene again when Wilson appeared in the doorway. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, the duty officer needs to speak with you. Maria followed Wilson to a small office where a major sat behind a desk covered with paperwork and communication equipment. Major David Foster looked like someone who'd spent considerable time in the field before accepting his current administrative assignment. His uniform was pressed and proper, but his hands showed the calluses and small scars of someone with extensive combat experience. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, Foster said, gesturing for her to take a seat. I've been trying to verify your authorization for operations in Sector 7, and I'm encountering some unusual complications. What kind of complications, sir? Your orders appear to be legitimate, but they're coming through channels I'm not familiar with. The signatures check out, but the authorizing authority isn't someone I can reach through normal communications. Maria knew she was at a decision point. She could continue maintaining her cover story and hope it held up under further scrutiny, or she could reveal enough information to resolve the situation quickly. The longer this continued, the more attention it would attract, and attention was the last thing her actual mission needed. Sir, may I speak freely? Of course. My actual assignment is classified at a level that requires special handling. The equipment inventory story is cover for security reasons. If you need verification, I can provide you with a contact number, but it will need to be a secure conversation. Foster leaned back in his chair, studying Maria with new interest. I see. And I suppose you can't tell me what this classified assignment involves? Not without proper authorization, sir. But I can tell you that it's completely routine and poses no security risk to your training operations. Staff Sergeant, I've been in the Marines for 15 years, and I've learned to recognize when someone is operating under special circumstances. Your field craft and situational awareness are exceptional, even for someone with combat experience. Maria remained silent, knowing that anything she said at this point would either compromise her mission or dig her deeper into a complicated explanation. Foster picked up his phone. I'm going to make some calls. In the meantime, you're welcome to wait here or in the conference room with Corporal Thompson's team. I'll wait with the Marines, sir. They've been very professional. As Maria returned to the conference room, she found Thompson, Johnson, Chen, and Martinez engaged in quiet conversation. They looked up as she entered, their expressions showing a mixture of curiosity and respect. "Everything all right, Staff Sergeant?" Thompson asked. "Just some administrative complications," Maria replied. "Nothing that can't be resolved with a few phone calls." Chen, who had been quiet during most of the encounter, spoke up. "Ma'am, can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "You've got scars on your hands that look like they came from rope work and moving through rough terrain. That's not typical for logistics personnel, even ones who've done convoy security." Maria looked down at her hands, realizing that these Marines were more observant than she'd given them credit for. The scars Chen had noticed came from years of specialized training and operations, the kind of activities that left distinctive marks on someone's hands and forearms. "You're very observant, Chen." "I did some additional training during my deployments, cross-training with different specialties. The Corps encourages that kind of professional development." Martinez leaned forward. "What kind of cross-training?" "Various things. Reconnaissance techniques, advanced marksmanship, survival skills. When you're supporting forward units, it helps to understand their capabilities and requirements." Johnson's eyes lit up. "Advanced marksmanship training? Like sniper school?" Thompson immediately intervened. "Johnson, that's enough questions. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez doesn't owe us her complete military biography." But Maria found herself oddly comfortable with their curiosity. These Marines represented the kind of soldiers she'd spent years protecting and supporting, even if they didn't know it. Their questions came from professional interest rather than suspicion, and their obvious competence and dedication reminded her why her work mattered. "It's all right, Corporal," she told Thompson. "I don't mind answering reasonable questions." She turned to Johnson. "I never attended formal sniper school, but I received some specialized marksmanship training. The Marines believe in developing well-rounded soldiers." "What's the longest shot you ever made?" Johnson asked eagerly. The question hit closer to home than Johnson could have known. Maria's longest confirmed kill remained classified, but it was a shot that had required every skill she'd developed over years of training and experience. The target had been an enemy sniper who was systematically eliminating Marines during a complex operation, and Maria's intervention had saved dozens of lives. "I've never had to take a shot in combat," she said carefully. "Most of my deployments involved convoy security and supply coordination, remember?" Johnson looked disappointed, but Thompson nodded approvingly. "Good answer, Staff Sergeant. Combat experience isn't something people should be eager to discuss." Chen was studying Maria with the intense focus of someone trying to solve a complex problem. "You know, my brother went through sniper school at Quantico. He told me they teach students to observe everything around them, to catalog details that might be important later. You've been doing that since we first encountered you." "Old habits from deployment," Maria replied. "When you've operated in hostile territory, you develop certain situational awareness techniques that become automatic." Martinez nodded understanding. "I know what you mean. I still check my 6 every time I enter a building, even here on base. Some things stick with you." The conversation was interrupted when Major Foster appeared in the doorway. His expression was neutral, but Maria could see that he'd received information that changed his understanding of the situation. "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, could I speak with you privately for a moment?" Maria followed Foster back to his office, where he closed the door and activated a white noise generator that would prevent their conversation from being overheard. "I made some calls," Foster said without preamble. "I can't get details about your actual assignment, but I've been told that you're operating under legitimate authority and that your presence here is completely authorized." "Thank you, sir. I've also been told that maintaining your cover identity is important for operational security reasons, and that I should minimize the number of people who have detailed knowledge of this conversation." Maria felt relief, but also concern. The fact that Foster had been able to verify her authorization meant that someone higher up the chain of command was now aware of her presence at 29 Palms. That wasn't necessarily a problem, but it was an additional variable in an operation that was supposed to remain completely invisible. Sir, I appreciate your thoroughness and discretion. Is there anything else you need from me? Just one thing, Foster said, his expression becoming more serious. Those 4 Marines who intercepted you are some of the best young soldiers I've seen. They're observant, professional, and dedicated. If your actual assignment involves the kind of work I think it might, they're exactly the type of Marines who should know that soldiers like you exist. Maria understood what Foster was suggesting. Thompson, Johnson, Chen, and Martinez had demonstrated the kind of tactical thinking and professional competence that made them candidates for specialized assignments. They'd also shown enough curiosity about advanced military capabilities to suggest they might be interested in expanding their own skills. I understand your point, sir, but I'm not in a position to discuss career opportunities or specialized training programs. I'm not asking you to recruit them, Foster clarified. I'm just suggesting that if the opportunity arose to show them what dedicated soldiers can accomplish with the right training and mission focus, it might be beneficial for everyone involved. Maria considered Foster's words carefully. Military leaders at his level didn't make casual suggestions about operational matters. If he was hinting that these Marines might be suitable for recruitment into specialized programs, it meant he'd observed qualities in them that went beyond basic competence. Sir, would it be possible for me to complete my actual assignment with those Marines providing security escort? It would give them some experience with different types of operations while ensuring my mission remains secure. Foster smiled. I think that could be arranged. Corporal Thompson's team was scheduled for additional reconnaissance training anyway. Having them escort a logistics specialist conducting equipment recovery would be excellent practice. Thank you, sir. I think that arrangement would work well for everyone. As Maria returned to the conference room, she found the 4 Marines exactly where she'd left them, though their conversation stopped abruptly when she appeared. Thompson stood as she entered, his posture reflecting the professional respect he'd maintained throughout the encounter. Staff Sergeant, is everything resolved? Yes, Corporal. In fact, Major Foster has suggested that your team might escort me while I complete my equipment search. He thinks it would be good training for your reconnaissance exercises. Johnson's face lit up with enthusiasm. Really? We get to help with your mission? Chen and Martinez exchanged glances that suggested they were pleased with this development, while Thompson maintained his professional demeanor despite what Maria suspected was considerable curiosity about what they might encounter. We'd be honored to provide escort, Staff Sergeant, Thompson said. When do you want to begin? We can start immediately if you're ready. The equipment I'm looking for is scattered across several locations, so it'll give you practice with movement and observation techniques. As the 5 soldiers prepared to leave the building, Maria reflected on how the morning had developed. What had started as a potential security complication had become an opportunity to work with 4 Marines who represented the best qualities of their service. They were professional, observant, and dedicated, exactly the kind of soldiers who made her own mission meaningful. Thompson gathered his team for a brief coordination session while Maria checked her equipment. She could hear him giving instructions about maintaining proper security protocols and professional behavior, reminders that suggested he understood this wasn't a typical training exercise. All right, Marines, Thompson concluded, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez has a job to do, and we're here to help her do it safely and efficiently. Stay alert, follow instructions, and remember that this is someone else's mission, not ours. Maria appreciated Thompson's leadership style. He was establishing clear expectations for his team while showing respect for her authority and mission requirements. It was exactly the kind of professional approach that made joint operations successful. Ready when you are, Staff Sergeant, Thompson reported. Excellent. Our first stop is about 2 kilometers northeast of here, near the area where your unit conducted night exercises 2 weeks ago. We'll be looking for night vision equipment that may have been left behind. As they left the building and headed back into the desert terrain, Maria felt a familiar sense of anticipation. She was about to conduct a classified equipment test while being escorted by 4 Marines who had no idea they were about to witness capabilities that few soldiers ever saw demonstrated. It would be an interesting day for everyone involved. The desert landscape stretched endlessly under the afternoon sun as the 5 Marines moved through the rocky terrain. Maria had taken point, with Thompson's team maintaining proper spacing and security protocols behind her. What they didn't know was that her route wasn't random. Every direction change, every pause to check terrain features, was carefully planned to test the new observation equipment she carried in her pack. After an hour of movement, they reached a cluster of large boulders that provided excellent concealment and fields of observation. Maria called a halt and began unpacking what appeared to be standard field equipment, though Thompson noticed immediately that some of the gear was unfamiliar. "Staff Sergeant," Thompson said quietly, "that doesn't look like standard issue equipment." "It's not," Maria replied, assembling what looked like an advanced spotting scope. "This is prototype gear being field tested for possible adoption by the Corps. Part of my mission involves evaluating its effectiveness under realistic conditions." Johnson moved closer, his curiosity overriding his usual caution. "What does it do?" Maria finished assembling the device and adjusted several controls that seemed far more complex than anything on standard military optics. "It's a next-generation observation system that combines thermal imaging, laser range finding, and digital enhancement capabilities. The idea is to give Marines better battlefield awareness." Chen whistled softly. "That sounds like something snipers would use." Among others, Maria agreed. The Corps is always looking for ways to give soldiers advantages in the field. She activated the system and immediately began scanning the surrounding terrain with practiced efficiency. Through the advanced optics, she could see details that would be invisible to the naked eye or standard binoculars. Heat signatures from small animals moving between rocks, the thermal shadows left by vehicles that had passed hours earlier, even the faint heat traces where people had walked across sun-warmed stone. Martinez positioned himself where he could observe Maria's technique. "You handle that equipment like you've used it before." "I received training on prototype systems during my last assignment," Maria replied, continuing her systematic scan of the area. "The military invests heavily in new technology, but it needs to be tested by people who understand field requirements." What Maria was actually doing was far more complex than equipment testing. The advanced optics were genuine military prototypes, but her real mission involved using them to identify and catalog potential sniper positions throughout the training area. The information would be used to develop better counter-sniper tactics and improve security protocols for future exercises. Through the scope, she spotted something that made her pause. About 800 meters away, partially concealed behind a rock formation, she could see the thermal signature of a person in a prone position. Someone was observing their location through what appeared to be a rifle scope. "Corporal Thompson," she said quietly, "we're being watched." Thompson immediately moved to her position. "Where?" 800 meters, bearing 095 degrees. Single individual in a concealed position behind the large boulder formation. Thompson raised his binoculars and searched the area Maria had indicated, but saw nothing. "I don't see anyone, Staff Sergeant." "Here, take a look through this." Maria stepped aside, allowing Thompson access to the advanced optics. Thompson peered through the scope and immediately saw what Maria had spotted. The thermal imaging revealed a clear human figure in a classic sniper position, motionless and well concealed from visual observation. "Jesus," Thompson breathed. "I would never have seen that with normal equipment." Johnson, Chen, and Martinez gathered around, their professional interest overriding protocol. "What is it?" Johnson asked. "Someone's watching us," Thompson replied. "In a concealed position about 800 meters out." Chen immediately began scanning the area with his binoculars while Martinez and Johnson spread out to improve their defensive position. Maria watched their response with approval. These Marines had good instincts and reacted professionally to potential threats. "Staff Sergeant," Martinez asked, "should we report this to base security?" Maria was studying the distant figure through the scope, noting details about equipment and positioning that told her more about their observer than the Marines could imagine. The person was using military-grade optics, maintained perfect stillness despite being observed, and had chosen a position that provided excellent fields of fire while offering multiple escape routes. "Not yet," she replied. This could be part of another training exercise. Let me see if I can identify who it is. She made subtle adjustments to the scope's controls, enhancing the image resolution and switching between different viewing modes. The thermal signature revealed details about the observer's equipment and positioning that confirmed her suspicions. This wasn't a random person or even a Marine conducting unauthorized surveillance. "Corporal Thompson," she said, "I need you and your team to maintain this position while I investigate our observer. Keep visual contact with me at all times, and be ready to provide covering fire if necessary." Thompson's expression showed concern. Staff Sergeant, with respect, approaching an unknown observer alone isn't tactically sound. We should move as a team or call for backup. Maria appreciated Thompson's tactical thinking, but she couldn't explain that their observer was almost certainly another special operations soldier conducting his own mission. The advanced equipment she was testing was part of a larger evaluation that involved multiple operators working in the same area. "I understand your concern, Corporal, but I have specific protocols to follow for situations like this. Trust me to handle this appropriately." She began moving toward the distant position, using terrain features to mask her approach while remaining visible to Thompson's team. Her movement was careful and deliberate, designed to signal non-hostile intent to the observer while demonstrating advanced field craft to the Marines watching her progress. Johnson tracked her movement through his binoculars. "She moves like my grandfather described snipers moving. Like she's reading every inch of ground before she steps on it." "I noticed that too," Chen replied. "There's something about the way she uses cover that's different from what they teach in basic infantry training." Thompson was beginning to suspect that Staff Sergeant Rodriguez was far more than she appeared to be. Her equipment was too advanced, her field craft too polished, and her comfort with complex tactical situations too natural for someone whose primary job involved logistics and supply coordination. Martinez lowered his binoculars. "Corporal, what do you think her real job is?" "I'm not sure," Thompson replied honestly, "but I don't think she's here to find missing night vision equipment." As Maria approached the position of their observer, she used hand signals that would be recognizable to anyone with special operations training. The response came immediately, a series of signals that confirmed her suspicion about the identity of their watcher. Staff Sergeant Michael Chen, no relation to the Marine named Chen, emerged from his concealment with the fluid motion of someone who'd spent years perfecting the art of remaining invisible. He was dressed in standard Marine camouflage, but his equipment was clearly specialized. The rifle he carried was a precision weapon system that most Marines would never see, much less operate. "Rodriguez," Chen said quietly, "I was wondering when you'd spot me." "About 20 minutes ago," Maria replied. "Your thermal signature was too distinctive once I got the new optics properly calibrated." Chen grinned. "I heard they were testing some interesting toys out here. How's the equipment performing?" "Better than expected. The thermal resolution is exceptional, and the range-finding accuracy is within specs." "How long have you been observing us?" "Since you left the base. I was tasked with providing overwatch for your operation, but those Marines with you are more observant than most. The young one especially keeps scanning for threats." Maria glanced back toward Thompson's position, where she could see the 4 Marines maintaining proper security while tracking her conversation with Chen. "They're good soldiers. Professional, alert, and tactically competent. Good enough to notice that you're not really logistics personnel? They're suspicious, but they're also respectful enough not to push too hard for answers I can't give them." Chen shouldered his rifle. "What's the plan for the rest of your mission?" "I need to test the equipment at 3 more locations, then file a complete evaluation report. The Marines think they're escorting me while I look for missing gear." "Want me to continue providing overwatch?" Maria considered the offer. Having another special operations soldier nearby would add a layer of security to her mission, but it might also raise additional questions from Thompson's team. On the other hand, their curiosity was already aroused, and Chen's presence could be explained as part of the equipment testing protocol. Affirmative. But maintain distance and concealment. These Marines are smart enough to spot you again if you're not careful. Roger that. See you at the debrief.
Chen disappeared back into his concealment with the same fluid motion he'd used to reveal himself.
Within seconds, he was completely invisible again, even to someone who knew exactly where he was positioned. Maria began her return journey to Thompson's position, noting that all 4 Marines were maintaining proper security protocols while obviously burning with curiosity about her conversation with the mysterious observer.
She'd need to provide them with an explanation that satisfied their professional interest without compromising operational security. "Staff Sergeant," Thompson called as she approached, "is everything secure?"
"Yes, Corporal."
"Our observer is Staff Sergeant Chen, conducting independent equipment evaluation in support of the same program I'm testing. He's been providing security overwatch for our movement."
Johnson immediately raised his binoculars and began searching the area where Maria had conducted her conversation.
"I don't see anyone, Staff Sergeant."
"That's the point," Maria replied. "He's trained to remain concealed while maintaining observation capability."
Chen, the Marine, looked confused. "There's another Chen involved in this operation?" "Different person entirely," Maria clarified. "It's a common name in the Corps." Martinez was studying the terrain where Maria had met with the other soldier. "Staff Sergeant, what kind of training does someone need to disappear like that? I've never seen anyone just vanish into landscape that open."
"Advanced reconnaissance training," Maria replied truthfully.
"The Corps has several programs that teach specialized concealment and observation techniques."
Thompson was putting pieces together in his mind. The advanced equipment, Maria's exceptional fieldcraft, her comfort with complex tactical situations, and, now the presence of another soldier with obviously specialized training. This wasn't a routine logistics mission, regardless of the official paperwork.
"Ma'am," Thompson said carefully, without asking for classified information, "can you tell us what we're really providing security for?" Maria respected Thompson's direct approach.
He'd identified the inconsistencies in her cover story without being confrontational or inappropriate. His question deserved an honest answer within the limits of what she could reveal. "Corporal, you're providing security for the field testing of advanced military equipment that may eventually be adopted by the Marine Corps. The equipment I'm evaluating has applications for reconnaissance, target acquisition, and battlefield awareness. The missing gear story provides cover for security reasons."
"And the other Staff Sergeant Chen?" "He's testing different equipment as part of the same program.
We're working independently but coordinating our activities for safety and security."
Johnson was practically vibrating with excitement. "So we're actually supporting the development of new Marine Corps capabilities?" "That's correct, Lance Corporal." Chen, the Marine, grinned. "This is a lot more interesting than looking for lost night vision devices." "It's also classified," Maria reminded them.
"What you've observed today stays within this group until you receive official permission to discuss it."
Thompson nodded seriously.
"Understood, Staff Sergeant."
OPSEC protocols apply. Martinez was studying the advanced optics Maria had been using. "Ma'am, would it be possible for us to observe a demonstration of the equipment's capabilities? For professional development purposes?" Maria considered the request.
Allowing the Marines to use the advanced equipment would give them insight into capabilities they might encounter in specialized assignments, and their observations might provide valuable feedback for the evaluation process. "I think that can be arranged," she decided. "In fact, your input on the equipment's usability and effectiveness would be valuable for the evaluation report." Over the next hour, Maria provided each Marine with hands-on experience using the advanced optics system. Their reactions were exactly what she'd expected from competent soldiers encountering superior technology: professional interest, tactical curiosity, and immediate recognition of the equipment's potential applications. Thompson was particularly impressed with the system's ability to identify concealed positions and movement that would be invisible to standard observation methods. This would completely change how we conduct reconnaissance and counter-reconnaissance operations. Johnson spent considerable time practicing with the range finding and target acquisition features. The accuracy is incredible. You could calculate firing solutions for targets at ranges that would be impossible with standard equipment. Chen and Martinez focused on the thermal imaging capabilities, noting how the system could track movement and identify heat signatures that revealed enemy positions and recent activity. This equipment would give Marines a significant advantage in almost any tactical situation, Martinez observed. That's the idea, Maria replied. But it needs to be tested thoroughly under realistic conditions before it can be approved for field deployment. As the afternoon progressed, Maria continued her systematic evaluation of the prototype equipment while the 4 Marines provided security and assistance. Their professionalism and tactical competence impressed her, and their enthusiasm for new technology reminded her why developing advanced capabilities for frontline soldiers was important work. Thompson proved to be particularly valuable as an observer, noting details about the equipment's operation and effectiveness that would be useful in her final report. His leadership abilities and tactical thinking suggested someone who could handle greater responsibilities with appropriate training and experience. Johnson's curiosity and willingness to ask detailed questions provided insights into how younger Marines might adapt to new technology. His enthusiasm was infectious, and his questions often revealed aspects of the equipment's capabilities that Maria might not have considered. Chen and Martinez brought different perspectives based on their individual backgrounds and specialties, offering observations about how the new equipment might integrate with existing Marine Corps procedures and training programs. As the sun began to set over the desert landscape, Maria realized that her encounter with Thompson's team had turned into something more valuable than a routine equipment test. These 4 Marines represented the next generation of Marine Corps leadership, and their input would help shape the development of capabilities they might eventually use in combat. "All right, Marines," she announced, "we have one more location to evaluate before we head back to base." The final evaluation location was a ridge line that offered commanding views of the entire training area. As they reached the elevated position, Maria set up the advanced optics system one last time while Thompson's team established security positions around the perimeter. The setting sun painted the desert landscape in brilliant oranges and reds, creating dramatic contrasts that would test the equipment's performance under challenging lighting conditions. Johnson was the first to notice something unusual in the distance. "Staff Sergeant, there's movement about 1,200 meters out, near that cluster of buildings." Maria immediately shifted the optics to the area Johnson had indicated. Through the advanced imaging system, she could see a group of figures moving with military precision around what appeared to be a simulated urban environment used for close-quarters combat training. But something about their movement patterns caught her attention. "Corporal Thompson, take a look at this," she said, stepping aside to allow him access to the scope. Thompson studied the distant figures through the advanced optics, noting details that would be impossible to see with standard equipment. There are 8 individuals moving in tactical formation, but their equipment and procedures don't match standard Marine Corps training protocols. "What do you mean?" Chen asked. "Their weapon systems are different, their movement patterns are more fluid, and they're using hand signals I don't recognize from Corps training." Maria knew exactly what Thompson was observing. The distant group was a special operations team conducting their own training exercise, using the simulated urban environment to practice techniques that regular Marines would never encounter. Their presence in the training area was coordinated with her mission, but explaining that would compromise operational security. "Could be Marines from a specialized unit," she suggested. "The Corps has several programs that use different equipment and tactics than standard infantry." Martinez was studying the distant group through his binoculars, though he could see only basic details without the advanced optics. "They move like the guys from Force Recon that I worked with during my last deployment. Very smooth, very coordinated." Force Recon uses specialized techniques, Maria agreed. "But there are other units with similar capabilities." Johnson was practically bouncing with excitement. "Staff Sergeant, could we observe their training exercise? For professional development?" Thompson immediately intervened. "Johnson, we're not here to spy on other Marines' training activities." "Actually," Maria said thoughtfully, "observing different tactical approaches might be valuable for your own professional development. And it would give me additional data on how this equipment performs when tracking multiple targets engaged in complex movement patterns." She made the decision partly because she genuinely believed these 4 Marines would benefit from observing advanced tactical techniques, and partly because she knew the Special Operations team would appreciate having additional observers to help evaluate their concealment and movement methods.
All right, we'll conduct passive observation for educational purposes, she decided. But we maintain proper distance and we don't interfere with their exercise in any way.
Over the next hour, the 4 Marines took turns using the advanced optics to observe the distant training exercise. What they saw challenged their understanding of what Marines could accomplish with proper training and equipment. The Special Operations team moved through the simulated urban environment with a precision and effectiveness that went far beyond standard military training. They cleared buildings, coordinated complex movements, and executed tactical procedures that demonstrated years of specialized preparation. "These guys are operating on a completely different level," Chen observed after spending time with the optics. "The way they coordinate movement and covering fire is like watching a perfect machine." Thompson was particularly impressed with the team's leadership and decision-making processes. "Notice how they adapt their tactics based on changing conditions. When they encounter unexpected obstacles, they immediately modify their approach without losing momentum or coordination."
Martinez focused on the team's equipment and weapons handling.
"Their gear is definitely not standard issue. Those weapon systems look like they're built for precision rather than general-purpose use."
Johnson was fascinated by the team's communication methods.
"They barely use radio communication, but they're perfectly coordinated.
It's like they can read each other's minds."
Maria provided context for what they were observing without revealing classified information. Advanced military units develop communication and coordination techniques that allow them to operate with minimal electronic signatures. It's part of what makes them effective in specialized environments.
As darkness fell across the desert, the distant training exercise concluded.
The Special Operations team extracted from the urban environment with the same precision they demonstrated throughout their exercise, disappearing into the landscape with movements that reminded Maria of her earlier encounter with Staff Sergeant Chen. "They're gone," Johnson reported, scanning the area through the advanced optics.
"I can barely track their movement even with this equipment."
"That's the point," Maria explained. "Advanced units train to become invisible when necessary, to move through hostile territory without detection." Thompson lowered his binoculars and turned to Maria with an expression of serious curiosity.
"Staff Sergeant, what kind of training does it take to reach that level of capability?"
Maria recognized the question as more than casual interest. Thompson was asking about career possibilities, about paths that might lead to the kind of specialized assignments they just observed. His question deserved a thoughtful answer. "It takes years of dedicated training, exceptional physical and mental conditioning, and the ability to operate under extreme pressure while maintaining perfect teamwork with other specialists. The Marines have several programs that develop those capabilities, but they're extremely selective and demanding."
"What kind of selection process?"
Chen asked. "Physical fitness requirements that go far beyond standard Marine Corps standards, psychological evaluation to assess mental resilience and decision-making under stress, technical testing of skills like marksmanship and tactical thinking, and extensive background investigation for security clearance purposes."
Martinez was quiet for a moment before asking, "Staff Sergeant, do you think any of us would be competitive for that kind of program?"
Maria studied the 4 Marines carefully before answering. Thompson had demonstrated exceptional leadership abilities and tactical thinking throughout the day. Johnson showed the kind of curiosity and enthusiasm that suggested someone capable of mastering complex skills. Chen had proven observant and analytical, with the attention to detail that specialized work required. Martinez brought maturity and combat experience that would be valuable in demanding training environments. "I think all 4 of you have demonstrated qualities that specialized programs look for," she said honestly. "Professional competence, tactical thinking, physical conditioning, and the ability to work as a team under pressure.
Would you be willing to provide recommendations if we decided to apply for specialized training?" Thompson asked.
Maria considered the request carefully. Her cover identity as a logistics specialist wouldn't carry much weight in special operations selection processes, but she had other options for helping these Marines if they were serious about pursuing advanced training. "I know people who could provide you with guidance about application processes and selection requirements," she offered. "If you're seriously interested, I can make some contacts." Johnson's enthusiasm was obvious. "I'm definitely interested. This is the kind of work I joined the Marines to do." Chen nodded agreement. "Me too. Today showed me capabilities I didn't know existed." Martinez was more thoughtful in his response. "I'd want to learn more about the specific requirements and time commitments, but yes, I'm interested." Thompson was quiet for a long moment before speaking. "Staff Sergeant, I appreciate what you're offering, but I have to ask, are you qualified to make recommendations for specialized programs?" It was exactly the kind of direct, thoughtful question Maria had come to expect from Thompson. He'd identified the logical inconsistency in her offer. A logistics specialist shouldn't have the contacts or credibility to influence special operations selection processes. "Corporal, I've worked with people from various specialized units during my deployments. Those connections allow me to provide guidance and introductions, even if I'm not directly involved in selection decisions." Thompson accepted her explanation, though Maria could see he remained curious about the exact nature of her military background. These 4 Marines had proven too intelligent and observant to accept simple explanations for complex situations. As they began packing equipment and preparing for the return journey to base, Maria reflected on how the day had developed. What had started as a routine equipment test had become an opportunity to evaluate 4 Marines who represented the best qualities of their service. More importantly, it had given her a chance to inspire them to consider career paths that would maximize their potential contributions to Marine Corps capabilities. "Staff Sergeant," Johnson said as they finished securing the equipment, "can I ask you one more question?" "Go ahead." "The shot I asked you about earlier, the longest one you ever made. You said you'd never had to take a shot in combat, but you answered the technical question about the M24's effective range without hesitation." Someone who'd never used precision weapons wouldn't know those specifications. Maria realized that Johnson had been thinking about her earlier responses, analyzing them for inconsistencies the way a good intelligence analyst would examine enemy information. His persistence suggested the kind of analytical thinking that would be valuable in specialized assignments. "You're very observant, Johnson." "I said I'd never used an M24 in combat, which is technically true. But I have fired various weapons systems during training and familiarization exercises. Marine Corps policy encourages cross-training with different equipment." It was another technically truthful answer that concealed more than it revealed, but Johnson seemed satisfied with the explanation. Maria appreciated his persistence and attention to detail, qualities that would serve him well if he pursued advanced training. The return journey to base was conducted in comfortable silence, each person processing the day's experiences. Thompson's team maintained proper security protocols while obviously discussing the implications of what they'd observed. Maria could hear fragments of their conversation, speculation about specialized training programs, discussion of application requirements, and expressions of excitement about potential career opportunities. As they approached the base perimeter, Maria made a decision that would have consequences far beyond the completion of her equipment evaluation mission. "Corporal Thompson," she said, "when we reach the command post, I'd like to speak with Major Foster about arranging a more detailed briefing on career opportunities in specialized programs." Thompson's expression showed surprise and appreciation. "You'd do that for us? You've demonstrated exceptional professionalism and competence today. The Corps benefits when good Marines are guided toward assignments that maximize their potential." Chen grinned. "This has been the best training day I've ever had." Martinez nodded agreement. "I learned more about military capabilities in one afternoon than I have in months of regular training." Johnson was practically glowing with excitement. "I can't wait to learn more about what's possible." As they reached the main building, Major Foster was waiting for them with an expression that suggested he'd been monitoring their progress throughout the day. His presence confirmed Maria's suspicion that their activities had been observed and coordinated at levels beyond what the 4 Marines realized. "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez," Foster said, "I trust your equipment evaluation was successful?" "Very successful, sir. And these Marines provided exceptional support throughout the mission.
Foster's expression showed approval as he looked at Thompson's team. "I've been receiving positive reports about your performance today.
Corporal Thompson, your team conducted themselves with exactly the kind of professionalism the Corps expects from its leaders."
Thompson stood at attention. "Thank you, sir. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez's mission gave us insight into capabilities we hadn't previously encountered. I understand you might be interested in learning more about specialized career opportunities?"
The 4 Marines exchanged glances before Thompson responded.
"Yes, sir. Today's experiences suggested possibilities we'd like to explore." Foster nodded. "I think that can be arranged.
Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, would you be available tomorrow morning to provide a more detailed briefing on specialized programs and application processes?" Maria recognized that Foster was offering her an opportunity to have a more extensive impact on these Marines' careers than her original mission had anticipated. It was also a chance to evaluate them more thoroughly as potential candidates for programs that could benefit from their obvious capabilities.
"I'd be honored to provide that briefing, sir."
As the group prepared to separate, Johnson approached Maria with a final question. "Staff Sergeant, whatever your real job is, thank you for showing us what dedicated Marines can accomplish with the right training and equipment." Maria smiled, touched by the young Marine's gratitude and perceptive observation. "Johnson, the Corps succeeds because Marines like you are always looking for ways to improve and contribute more effectively.
Don't ever lose that curiosity and enthusiasm."
Thompson stepped forward to shake Maria's hand. "Staff Sergeant, regardless of what tomorrow's briefing reveals, today changed how we think about our careers and potential."
"Thank you for that."
As Maria watched the 4 Marines walk away, discussing the day's experiences with obvious excitement, she realized that her equipment evaluation mission had accomplished far more than testing new technology. She'd identified 4 Marines with the qualities needed for specialized assignments, inspired them to consider career paths that would maximize their contributions, and demonstrated the kind of capabilities that made such assignments meaningful.
Major Foster approached as the Marines disappeared into the building. "Those are exceptional young soldiers."
"Yes, sir. They have the intelligence, dedication, and teamwork abilities that specialized programs need. And they had an exceptional instructor today, even if they don't fully understand what they experienced." Maria understood that Foster recognized more about her background than he could officially acknowledge. "They learned because they were ready to learn, sir.
My role was just providing the opportunity."
Staff Sergeant, tomorrow's briefing could have a significant impact on their futures.
Are you prepared to provide the kind of guidance that will help them make informed decisions about specialized career paths?
Yes, sir. These Marines deserve to understand their options and the requirements for pursuing advanced training. As Maria completed her mission paperwork and prepared for the next day's briefing, she reflected on how a routine equipment test had become an opportunity to shape the careers of 4 Marines who represented the future of their service. Thompson, Johnson, Chen, and Martinez had proven they possessed the qualities needed for specialized assignments, and tomorrow's briefing would help them understand how to pursue those opportunities. The morning's encounter that had begun with 4 suspicious Marines stopping her path had evolved into something far more significant: the discovery of 4 exceptional soldiers who were ready to take their service to the next level, guided by someone who understood exactly what that level required and what it could accomplish.